You made it here on time, or you made it to be here? You made it here early.
Got your shirt, adjusted your skirt.
Yep. Pam was telling me to take this one.
Oh, you'll say it. You'll be the next one.
That would be the 21st, yes, on
Good morning. Our speaker today is Michael P. Balzano. He is the son of working-class Italian immigrants and was born in New Haven, Connecticut in the 30s. As a student growing up, he had difficulty in his studies because of a learning disability that was never detected. After dropping out of high school at 17, he had scores of jobs. He finally found work as a garbage collector, but a back injury ended his ability to do physical labor. At age 21, he returned to high school. With hard work and the right training, he overcame his handicap and was able to finish high school and college, eventually earning his doctorate at Georgetown University. He subsequently worked in government as an advisor to several successful presidents, director of a federal agency, and established his own consulting company in 1985. As president of Balzano Associates, he advised CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Mike is the author of several books on government and public policy. His latest book, Building a New Majority, which came out in 2015, is a blueprint of how to win an election by gaining the support of the working class. It's a fascinating autobiography and an important message for our time. As a homeowner at Lake of the Woods for nearly 35 years, Mike says he does his best writing in the peaceful surroundings of our beautiful community. His topic is how both political parties failed the working class. His book will be available today for a reduced price after the meeting, and he will also sign copies and take credit cards. Please welcome Michael Balzano.
Okay, is this okay? Okay. First of all, I want to thank so many of you people who showed up today. I'm amazed at the size of this crowd. I want to thank Violet and Tina, because they were the first people to read the book and decide, let me see if we can get him to speak here, and I'm honored to speak. I also want to thank a lot of people at Lake of the Woods who bought my book and wanted me to sign it, and I didn't know they bought the book. I had an accident on June 1. I fell down, and that's why I'm sitting in this armchair here, but I was in a wheelchair for the first month, and then I was on a walker for 2 more months, and then I was on a cane, so I'm moving around, but I have not been at the lake all summer. So a lot of people who bought books, I want to sign them, and I'd be honored to sign them. They also had to move my original speaking engagement from July 16th to this day. I speak before a lot of different groups. Sometimes they're economic clubs, economic societies, women's clubs, Republican clubs, political clubs. I've also spoken before senior citizens groups, not this size, but the senior citizens are my favorite. Because, first of all, they live through the history that is contained in this book. They have experience. They have wisdom. And I love talking to somebody who at least is in the generation that understands where I'm coming from. I'm going to be 81 next month, okay? my wife and I hired this wonderful girl right out of college, about 2 years ago. She was a fantastic kid, and good grades and everything. We were talking, and I said, well, we deal with labor unions, and most of my unions are John Wayne types. And she said, well, who's John Wayne? That was a big wake up for all of us. My God. This book, on the surface, is an examination of all the elections that took place between 1972 and 2012. Now, that's enough to want to make everybody clear the room, okay? But it's not a boring book. I've written it as an autobiography. It is an autobiography which discusses my relationship with 5 U.S. presidents, and really it was more like 8. My book is a behind-the-scenes look at the campaigns that made these people president and their administrations, because sometimes they campaigned on one thing and then they did something totally different. Happens a lot. Now, my official biography talks about the garbage collector and all that stuff, but because the big thought is, how the hell does this guy go to work for presidents? Okay, he's a garbage man. Well, there's a lot to it. First of all, I was a very troubled kid. I mean, I was a bad news kid. I wasn't just a problem in high school. I was bad news. I was thrown out of one Catholic school. I was thrown out of one public school. And I was thrown out of the military. Right. So you can see where the direction this guy's coming from. I played hooky instead of going to school. I was like an urban Tom Sawyer. New Haven, Connecticut is right on a major seaport of Long Island Sound. And I just wandered over the docks. I wandered through abandoned warehouses. I played on coal barges. I watched giant oil tankers unloading. I even watched the dredging of New Haven Harbor. They took 30 feet out of the bottom of New Haven Harbor so they could get super tankers in. I played in live railroad yards. I mean, I can remember like it was yesterday. I'm standing on the tracks, and trains are going by in front of me and behind me, and engineer looking out the window and saying, what the hell is this kid standing on the tracks for? Okay? I was not alone. I'm telling you, God sent a guardian angel for all the places that I was in. I say this in the second book that I'm working on now. I remember sitting on one of these warehouses 80 feet off the water, and a sloping roof, and I'm sitting on the end of the roof with my legs hanging off the end, and all I'm saying, now, how the hell did you do this? Okay, I was not alone. I really believe that God had a place for me. Not yet. Okay, so I used to sneak past security guards in factories because I loved factories. I would like to see what they were doing, you know. So I would sneak past the security guards, and I'd walk through the factories. Now, I was caught. Let me tell you, I was caught all the time. I never got away with anything. I was always caught. And by the age of 13, people began to say, you know, this guy's a little crazy, okay? Then I was involved in a garage that somehow was set on fire. And after that, all the parents prohibited their children from playing with me. And the name that I had was Crazy Mikey. Now, on the one hand, I didn't care. I didn't play sports. I don't play baseball. I don't even know how those games are played. I played with guns. I played with bow and arrows. I spent my time literally in dangerous places. So I didn't play sports. The truth was, I wasn't crazy. My grandmother, I've got a picture of my grandmother here. She came here in the 1880s. And in Italian, she never spoke English. She kept saying to me, you're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. Yeah. I was an undiagnosed learning disabled kid. I am dyslexic. I still am. I misread words. I confuse words within a sentence. 9 out of 10 telephone numbers I dial are wrong. Okay, I can add, I can subtract, I can even multiply. Long division is out of the question. Okay, so this is who I am. Now, what happens with kids like this, including me, you get ostracized. Nobody wants to go near him. He's crazy, okay? And when you do that to a kid, he winds up doing other things. You know, he doesn't get better, he gets worse. And that's what I did. My teachers thought I was dumb. I thought I was dumb. Why not? Okay. I spoke Italian. Italian was spoken in the house and on the street. My grandmother, who we got a picture of back here, she was daycare for all the kids. That was Italian. I quit school when I was 16, really. I failed at every single thing I did for 5 years. I tried every trade. I was either fired or I quit because I didn't want to do it. I tried to quit the military too. I mean, I don't like this anymore. But they threw me out, okay? And I took jobs and never showed up for them, okay? So, yes, I worked as a garbage collector. That's the only job. It was a political job. My parents went to the local Don, that's who he was. Don't worry about it, Jenny, we'll take care of him. You know, next thing I know, I'm on a garbage truck, okay? And I did that for about 3.5 years until I got very lucky. Very lucky. I hurt my back. I couldn't lift up a pound. And all I could think of was, holy Christ. Now I am physically disabled and mentally disabled. And that was the biggest break in my life. Everything that ever happened to me was lucky, okay? I will tell you that. I believe that. A friend of mine who I played guitar in a band, he was a drummer. I couldn't lift the amplifier out of the trunk. And he said, look, Mike, he said, I've got a job and you could work for me. And he said, you only have to pick up something like a piece of glass. And I said, Ray, you don't understand. I'm stupid, okay? He said, no, look, I'll help you. I can do this, okay? I'll help you. So I took the job, 49 cents an hour. And I took the job with the understanding to myself that I want to go last a few days. It's the average job, okay? The Wall Street Journal timed me, I had 56 jobs in 1 year, okay? I was always had a job by Tuesday and I was always out of a job by Friday, okay? But I always worked. I mean, I keep telling people, yeah. I started as an apprentice lens grinder and a miracle occurred. I thought I'd be there a couple of days. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into years, and I became a master craftsman lens grinder. Oh. So, wow. At that time, all the boss, it was American Optical Company, they said, no, you really ought to get a high school education. I mean, come on, you know. So I went back to school at night. It wasn't a GED, it was a full-time at night. And I loved it. I went back to school. I went to school when I was 21. I read at the 4th grade level. So you can imagine how much fun that was. But I toughed it out, you know. I graduated when I was 25. And I got my optical license at 25, and suddenly I was managing a small optical company. My parents were elated. You know, when I had 56 jobs a year, I mean, my parents were so embarrassed they didn't want to talk to people on the street. Because, you know, they only had, between the two of them, they had 4 jobs all their life. I had a job a week, you know. So when I got my optical license and I started in this company, I mean, they were just delighted, you know. So, and so was the community. I mean, because the neighborhood, everybody in the neighborhood had a job. So what they said was, see, crazy Mikey grew up. Isn't that great? No, it took him 26 years to do it, but, well, while I was making eyeglasses, I ran into a very important woman in my life. The first woman was, her name was Evelyn Casey. She was an instructor at the University of Bridgeport. And she said, you know, and we would talk. And she said, you know, I don't believe you haven't gone to college. And I said, well, your language, your diction. I said, well, you know, I learned how to speak English by listening to the radio. Because in the Italian community, I had the Lone Ranger, I had Jack Armstrong, and I learned English from listening to the radio. So she said, you know, you really ought to go to college. I said, no, I'm an optician here, I've got a job. And she said, well, why don't you take one course? What do you like? I said, you know, I really like history. I like Shakespeare. I mean, it doesn't fit. I'm just kidding. She says, well, why don't you take one course, okay? So the university was right down the road. I drove down and I signed up as an unmatriculated student. Now why? See, an unmatriculated student, you don't get credit. You just take the course, okay? I couldn't pass the entrance exam. The entrance exam was all multiple choice. I couldn't do it, okay? So I took a course in history and I got an A. Then I took a course in psychology and I got an A. I took a course in sociology, I got an A. Took a course in astronomy, I got an A. And at that point, the faculty began saying, hey, there's this guy who's an older guy, and he's an older guy, 29, 26 years old, and you know, he should be here. So suddenly I wind up in a meeting with the dean of students, and he said, you know, you got almost a year's worth of credit that's straight A, and you ought to think about coming to school here full time. And I said, I can't, I'm an optician. And he said, you know, you'll be an optician for the rest of your life. But if you get a college education, the whole world might change for you. He said, I'll tell you what. He said, with those grades, I can get you a Dana scholarship. But you got to work 1 year, full time, you got to get credit. I said, but I can't pass the entrance exam. And he said, well, I'm Dana students. Why would I expect anybody to pass the entrance exam if he's getting straight A's? Okay. So I accepted it. I quit my job as an optician. My parents went nuts. Like, oh my God, he's back again. It's crazy. Mike, what are you doing? The whole community said that. Because I used to walk around with a coat and tie. I wore a suit weekdays, not even on Sunday, because I was, I was respectable. I was making $15,000 a year, and that was big money in those days. Crazy Mikey was back. Well, I started the university full time, and I surprised everybody. I surprised myself. I graduated magna cum laude. Oh, I mean, the whole university was upside down. And they said, you have to continue. You got to go to graduate school. And I said, well, what would I do? They said, you got to go to graduate school. And the faculty sat me down, and the dean, and we applied to 4 schools. We applied to Yale, because that was right next door, University of Chicago, Stanford University, and Georgetown. Well, by return mail, the answer came back, no, okay? And I hadn't heard from Georgetown. I figured, well, they're all gone. I'll go to the University of Connecticut. I'll do the same thing, you know? And one night, about 9:30, I lived in a house with 4 other guys. And there was a phone call. Mike, it's for you. Who is it? Some guy. I get on the phone. I said, hello. And he says, Mr. Bolzano. He said, I'm looking at your transcript. And there's something that doesn't make sense. You graduated #1 in your class, and yet on the graduate records, which are multiple choice, you bombed out. And I said to myself, if this guy's #1, what the hell must the rest of them look like? So I started to I said, well, look, here's the thing. I said, I can't take multiple choice. I said, I don't know why I'm missing. And he said, I'm the same way as you are, And I said, who are you? He said, I'm Father Horrigan. I'm the dean of the graduate school at Georgetown. I said, you're calling 9:30 at night? He said, I'm a priest. What am I doing? He said, I'm calling you because the faculty has looked at your life and they want you here. And I said, they do? He said, yes. He said, now, I am authorized tonight to offer you a full scholarship for a PhD, but you gotta go past the master's degree and you gotta get A- like you've been doing. And I said, I'll do it. He said, there's a woman here who wants you. She's a young woman, she's teaching here, she's still working on her doctor's degree, but she wants to be your mentor. That was Jean Kirkpatrick. Boom. Second thing. Now, what the hell does all of this to do with the White House? Well, I got my PhD with distinction. So I was the second person in 50 years to get distinction in political philosophy. Okay. The newspapers, the university told the newspapers that this guy had done all these things, And suddenly I'm on the front page of a Washington newspaper. Richard Nixon reads the story. And Nixon is having a problem communicating, like a lot of Republicans do, with working class people. And he said, we got to get somebody in here who knows how to talk to working people. And it was a month before that article appeared. And what happened was the White House staff told him that there was no such person. And then a man named Charles Colson got a hold of my resume and said, uh-oh, this is the guy. So I became the man they were looking for. I became the third highest ranking Democrat in Nixon's administration. I told him that I had voted against him twice, that my candidate was Hubert Humphrey. And he said, you know, Hubert's a good guy. He said, we disagree on the means, but we agree on the goals. He's fine, don't worry about him. And I said the same thing to Hubert Humphrey. I said, they've offered me a job. And he said, take it, what's the matter? We'll have one of our guys in there. And I said, what? I said, but it's Nixon. He said, Nixon's a good guy. Forget this stuff in the campaigns. Okay, not like today. Not like today. So, anyway, I became the third highest Democrat. And what happened was I was assigned working class issues and industrial labor unions. Those are the people I met with. And that's when that Wall Street Journal article, I got copies of it for you. If you can't read the book, read the article, it's funny as hell. But that's what I did. And Nixon liked me. I was probably one of the very few people on Colson's staff who did not go to jail. Everybody I knew went to jail. And I'll tell you this too. I lucked out again because there was a very famous man at the White House who didn't like me at all. See, the president might like you. That's not enough. You got to get the chief of staff, you got to get all the other guys to like you. Thank God they put me on the enemies list. So when I went before 2 different grand juries, they had no idea. I said, not only did I not know what the hell they were doing, I was on the enemies list. That was it. Okay. Before Nixon left the White House, well, actually right after the election, the book tells all these stories and stuff. Not all of them, but some of them. And he nominated me to direct a federal agency. So here's this 29, 30-year-old guy. I directed an agency called Action. People don't know that, but they know what the Peace Corps is. Peace Corps is one of those programs. I was a director of the Peace Corps. I was the 4th director of the Peace Corps. My mother knows that. Nobody else knows that, you know? I played the same role that I played for Nixon for Ronald Reagan, for George Bush, and for Bush Jr. In 1985, I set up a company, Balzano Associates, and we deal with specialized communications. I represent labor unions in about 30 states. I say, am I a Republican? Yeah, about 70% of it, because I studied economics, macro and micro. I studied fiscal policy. I know a little bit about finance. I know. So there's certain things my Democrat friends want that they can't afford, they don't understand it, it's not going to work. So I'm 70% Republican. Well, my mother had a picture of Roosevelt on one wall and Jesus Christ on the other wall, and I'm 30% Democrat. And I was involved in major programs. I mean, okay, my company, because of all the unions that I deal with, the proximity, I know what everybody in every company is thinking. So I'm able to predict, prevent, or stop strikes. That's one of my major things that I do. I did the space station. I was on that space station, still up there, 10 years. I was the consultant on the largest earth dam that was ever built in the United States, Big Bear Dam up in California. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the book. I'm not going to read the book to you. What I want to do today is to take away what I believe are some things that the book pretty much proves, okay? I have studied, I've worked for, and I have been near observing pretty much most of the political leaders of the last part of the 20th century, 48 years. So the statements I'm making, you can disagree with. But I will tell you, they're pretty close to accurate, okay? Number one, no political party can be elected in the United States without capturing the majority of the working class people. More so today than ever, okay? Two, the party of Roosevelt, my party, my mother's party, my grandmother's party, they always got the votes of working class people. They had a monopoly on the working class. But not today. Today, the leadership of the Democratic Party has a different philosophy. They are progressives. The progressives have transformed the Democratic Roosevelt Party into an elitist party that no longer represents working class people. And this book has got chapter and verse, point after point after point. Number 3. With the exception of Nixon and Reagan, especially Nixon, because Nixon liked me. He said, you know, you remind me of me when I was a kid. And Nixon and Reagan were working class people themselves. I mean, Reagan talks about having oatmeal for lunch. And it was a treat when they had sugar in it, you know? And we talked about that. I said, you know, when I was a kid, we had something that was called baboic in the Italian. You remember baboic? It's boiled cornmeal with kidney beans in it and with a chuck steak that's ragged, shaken, and the juice of it is poured on it, and it's in a big pan, and it goes in the oven, and you bake it, and you eat it for a whole week. Now today, but they were starving, and today, that's a delicate food in most of the restaurants. They call it, they call it polenta. Polenta, my foot. It was Italian soul food, you know? Now, I make Republicans angry when I say things like this. With the exception of Nixon and Reagan, they don't know how to talk to working class people. That's what Nixon was looking for. Nixon said to me, look, the guy who drives to church on Sunday in a pickup truck with a machine, with a toolbox in the back and a rifle rack on the back window, he's a Republican, but he doesn't know he's a Republican. And the problem is nobody here can talk to him. And that's what I want you to do. And so if you look in this paper, I was on front page Wall Street Journal, Life magazine, I mean, I'm not going to, the Today Show, I was on everything you could think of. And it worked. We got a whole bunch of people talking to me. That's where I developed my relationship with all the unions. Now, Republicans don't win elections. Democrats lose them. And they lose them, you know what I'm talking about. Democrats lose them when they start trashing the values, it's that old word, of the Roosevelt Coalition. Roosevelt Coalition was a very moral group of people. When you start trashing their values, the working people vote Republican. I've seen it in 68, 72, 1980, 84, and 86. It's all in the book. They're all there, okay? The problem with Republicans is when they win the election, and I was there when they won. Look at those pictures back there. We're all celebrating victories, no? Well, why didn't they build a majority? They didn't build a majority because they didn't associate with them once they voted for them, they lost all contact with them. Worse than that, my Republican friends are constantly trying to repeal the legislation that protects working people. I mean, come on. So what you have today, from Roosevelt on, the whole thing has changed now. Okay. The unions, and I deal with all of them. I don't deal with public employees. I don't. I deal with people who make things with their hands. Anybody who builds satellites to submarines. Machine tool guys. They now realize that they have created a one-party system that doesn't want them in the party. And they see the bodies all over the place. No more manufacturing. What do you think that is? Okay. So, and here's the horrible thing, and I tell this to my Republican candidates when I have them. Understand this, friend. Unions don't play a big role in the country anymore because you don't see them working. But let me tell you something. If you're going to win or lose by a landslide, you don't need me. But the tighter that margin is, look out for Ohio. Look out for the Rust Belt. Look out for the aerospace workers, okay, down there in Florida, okay? They have a choice. If they vote Democrat, they know they're going to lose all their industrial jobs. If they vote Republican, they could lose their union, okay? So this is the dilemma they face. Now, The industrial unions in this country have been abandoned. Both parties. Both parties have just walked out on them. See, everybody wants to go back to manufacturing. See, what they're talking about is building roads and highways. That's not manufacturing. Those are contractor jobs. No, that's not manufacturing. We're talking about building things. They're building a space station, building a bomber, building a fighter, building all these things, okay? The current generation of working people, and I tell them this, it's a hard conversation. They've been abandoned by free trade economists, and they've been nailed to two crosses. One is free trade, which doesn't exist, and the other one is globalism. And they're caught in the middle. Both parties have run out on them, okay? Now this is going to be a problem for us in terms of national security. Because you see, as those factories close down and went overseas, we can't build the war machines. The working class of yesterday, the master craftsmen, they built all the weapon systems that kept America free throughout all the wars of the 20th century. We're facing the loss of the last generation of master craftsmen. There's a guy over here in Newport News, and he's got his hand, his greasy paw, on a shaft that's turning for the Ford Carrier. And the shaft is turning. It's a big steel, round steel. He's got his hand on it. And one of the kids who works for me, he says, what's he doing? He's standing on a ladder, he's doing this. I said, he's feeling for the variance of 1/1000 of an inch. When that guy was 75, okay? And the head of the yard said, you know, you can replace me. I mean, I own the company. You can replace me in an hour. I can't replace that guy in 15 years. It takes 8 years to make a nuclear welder. So, now what does that mean? Okay, it means we're in danger. Okay, I'm going to say this now today. I got up 4 o'clock this morning and said, do I dare? Yeah, I want to talk about it. In 1950, 68% of every ship that floated in the ocean had an American flag, an American crew, was built in the United States. Today, it's 0.05. 0.05, okay? We only have 220 odd ships. If you count the food carriers, we only have about 200 ships. You'll like this one. We only have about 200 ships that can transport anything in the private sector. The merchant marine is almost gone. If you throw in the Navy transport ships, they call it the Military Sea Lift Command, that's only 100 ships. So now you're talking 300 ships. The Chinese have 3,000 ships. The Russians have 2,500 of the most modern vessels ever built, okay? And all of those vessels can be turned to military overnight. In fact, when you read this book, if you ever read it, when Bush wanted to go to Kuwait, he called me in and he said, you got to get the unions to help me. I pull all the unions in the room. There's a photo in the book about it there. The Gulf War, to get the troops in the Gulf War, we had to grab what's called CRAF, the Civil Reserve Fleet. We began flying them in on American Airlines, United Airlines, and once they got there, we couldn't resupply them. You remember those troops drinking that water all day long? You know how much water that is? We had no water. We couldn't bring water, food, ammunition. So George Bush was a real statesman, older Bush. He borrowed ships from all over the world so we could resupply our troops. No. And that was only a 60-day war, okay? I just did a TV series. There's a group, you have to get it on the internet. It's called maritimetv.com. I did a 5-part series there talking about what we need to do for the machine tool industry. And I did one show, and they usually get a couple of hundred hits on it. We got almost 3,000 hits on it. And the guy said, would you come back and do a series on it? So we got one more to do, and Kelly's going to help me do it. My book deals with the crisis that's facing this country. I mean, this is a hot book. This is a real hot book, okay? Because I'm telling it like it is. When I finished the book, I gave it to 2 clients. And I said, you may consider this book my resignation. Because I'm saying things in here you're not going to want to hear. And both of them came back and said, no, it's time. So both of them have agreed, and it's out. In fact, they asked me to do one more thing. They said, you need to write a 100-page book, not 300, a 100-page book on your life story. you should be talking about it. And I was home for 4 months, and I got the first draft done. It's called Crazy Mikey Went to the White House. I got it. So, this book is a textbook. It's a textbook, okay? It's in a lot of, it's the Columbia Library, it'll be all university libraries. It'll be read by students of government. It will be read by campaign operatives. They've grabbed it already, okay? It will be read by future candidates. I got myself involved in too many issues around here, and I lost a year on this book. This book should have been out a year earlier because Bush asked me for it, Rubio asked me for it. I told him I couldn't get involved in a primary. I had to give the book to everybody, and it wasn't finished, okay? I think after this election, a lot of people are going to want to read this book, because this book is a roadmap. It's a roadmap how you can win a presidency, but it could also be a manual for doing an autopsy. And I think that's what we're going to have here. Anyway, the one comment I would have you read on the back of the book was written by President Reagan's cabinet secretary. He's in the book. He's all over this book. He was. You can't talk to the president unless you talk to him. He has got to know what you're going to say. You're going to give him paper. I need to see the paper. He approves everything. And he sent me a note while I was writing the book. And when I finally finished the book, I said, I'd like to use your email. He said, sure, Mike, go ahead. The email says, this is a clearly must-read book for anyone possessing the desire to advance to the winning side of a national election. Notice he said anyone. Because I said, look, if the Democrats can pull their act together, so what? I'm a nationalist. I want the country to work, you know? Last thing. I wanted to thank, but she's not here, there were so many people. With my background, you know how I got to work for all these presidents, okay? They knew me on a first-name basis. It was a very personal relationship. As a matter of fact, if you go back there, I took some of the photos of each of the different meetings I had with the president, and I put them on a board back there. The last picture in my book is on that wall. It's a picture of me and Richard Nixon, and that's when I promised him I would write the book. I wrote a paper, a major paper for the Hofstra University, their symposium on the presidency, and I wrote the chapter in the book on the politics of '72. And Nixon said, you did such a great job on that. And I said, Mr. President, I promise you before I die, and I prayed that I would finish this book. I prayed that I would finish this book. I told him I will write the book on the new majority. And that's the title of it, Building a New Majority. His daughter was crazy about it, everybody's crazy about it. I was supposed to speak at the Nixon Foundation. I hurt my leg, I couldn't go. They're gonna do it in January. I wanted to say thank you to Bob and Ann Grimm. They read my book. And Ann wrote a review for the Barnes & Noble. And she said, this guy is a product of two people, two women, Jean Kirkpatrick and his grandmother. I dedicated this book to my grandmother. Her name was Eleanor Pirelli. She came here in the 1800s. She was 15 years old. I got a picture of her back there. I dedicated the book to her because if it wasn't for her coming here, and she stood by me when everybody said I was crazy. She said, no, he's going to be okay, he's going to be okay. She stood by me, okay? You see, the one sentence that stayed with me all my life, even when I was screwing up, she said, America, we were all starving in Italy. They were dying, they were starving to death. In America, the streets are lined with gold, but you got to bend down to pick it up. She was right, okay? I also dedicated this book to the working class. The kid who did a job on this cover, we talked and talked and talked, and he listened, and finally he came up with this cover. It's a fantastic cover. Everybody sees the cover. You can't miss it. The stars on the flag are fading, and the politicians aren't going to fix it. It's those guys on the gantry who are trying to fix the flag. The working class can catch the falling flag. I believe that. So I dedicated the book to them. And I am so delighted that I had the opportunity to talk to you. Some of you people I see everywhere at the lake, but I don't know who you are. You don't know who I am here. But we know each other now, and thank you so much for coming to this meeting this morning. down here for a while to sign some books. I hate selling books. I mean, I don't really like to do this, but I'll be here for a while. And maybe after your meeting, however you want to work it. I have not talked about contemporary politics in my talk and in my book, but I'll take questions on that now. Yes, ma'am.
Who's gonna win?
You know, I'm going to tell you something. Gene Kirkpatrick's husband, his name was Everon Kirkpatrick. He introduced me to Hubert Humphrey, good friend. He said, I never judge polls until the final poll that's taken on election day. And he said, I've worked with people who we never thought could possibly win. He worked for a guy who a month before was drunk, arrested in a whorehouse in Minnesota, and the guy still got elected. He said, so I don't even think about that anymore. I don't know, but I'll tell you what, whoever gets elected, God help us. God help us. Nobody wants it to one of them. Yes, sir.
I agree with you 100% about the people ignoring the working class. But we have a whole 51% of, sorry, young lady, that don't know who John Wayne was. How do we educate them? The schools aren't doing it.
Well, you know what, I've got some of my major corporations are talking to me about that, because I get involved in 10-year projects. I'll be 81. So, but we have not done a good job. I run a seminar in my office, okay? The 3 books I want to write, and I'm praying to God that I get it. The first one, I've done. The second one will be done by 3 more months. And that's for high school dropouts, guidance counselors, and teachers. How do you deal with a kid like me, okay? And the third one is what I was trained for, and that's the classical underpinnings of the United States Constitution. The kids aren't being taught that today. They are. Thank God for Rush Limbaugh, who's starting to write articles about a horse who was there writing, the Paul Revere's horse. George Washington is viewed as a white, slave-holding capitalist, okay? Wait a minute, come on. These were the geniuses that put this country together. We don't teach that. The kids today who are angry, they all voted for Bernie Sanders. What that proves to me, see, they said, well, I have a college education, I can't get a job. Well, that's because you majored in subjects for which there's no jobs, okay? We can't blame everybody else, So what's happened is they want free education now. They want somebody to pay for the debt, okay? We should be opening trade schools. We should be getting people to fix things. And I've got a whole get a boat mechanic on the lake, you know what I mean? You don't have them,
That's right.
No, I think that's a big one. Okay, anybody else?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I'm part of that generation, and I am so fearful. I have 6 great-grandchildren.
Oh, God, yeah.
Born of beautiful children who put themselves through school after the first year. They were able to do things like that. I went to Brooklyn College at night, working all day. I paid for my books. I don't know how we ever instilled in the minds of this current generation. I never heard of daycare centers for babies in my generation. I'm so fearful for what's happening in the country. I picked up that book to tell you, sir, that I'm about as apolitical as they come. It made so much sense to me, but there is no more working class in the way it used to be. And if you don't have, I have grandchildren who are scientists and so forth, and they worked hard to get there.
Yeah.
But now we have populations coming in, and the country is trillions of dollars in debt, and they're leaning on the jobs that my children have paying taxes. I'm so confused.
Oh, no, it's frightening. It's frightening. Yeah, it's frightening. 72% of the people in this country who are going to vote in this election do not want to go in the same direction. They think we're going in the wrong direction. So, I tell people I was the luckiest guy in the world. I still believe that. Okay, everybody I ever met, I mean, all these people I met, they were giants, and I lucked out. Somebody was watching over me.
What can I do to
I don't know, I mean,
change that?
I don't know, I don't know. I'm talking to a whole bunch of industrialists who are trying to figure that out, because they understand it, you know? We'll talk, okay? Yes, sir?
Were you involved in any of the Democratic administrations?
No, well, except Hubert Humphrey. When I lived with Gene Kirkpatrick for a while, and they were doing polling for him, that's when I got to know him. And that was the last time I voted Democrat. And I told Nixon I voted against you twice, you know? But I was not involved in any of them, no. I mean, look, right after Nixon, Ford, I mean, you know, Ford didn't try. Ford did not try. He didn't think he could be beaten, okay? And there was nobody who could go near Carter. I mean, you know, the prime rate was 21%. I mean, 21% is absolute zero. I mean, nothing works. Molecules don't even go. So there was nobody I could work for, you know? And then when Reagan came along, I mean, the story of Reagan's a good one. Reagan came along, to me, he was another Nixon, you know? And he asked me to work for him, and we talked about what you want to do. And he said, look, I want to turn this place upside down. I haven't seen anybody who wants to do that now, okay? I mean, I don't think the Democrat's going to do that. And the Republican wants to try. I don't think he's going to get the chance to try. But who knows?
They're out of time.
Yeah, okay, you're out of time, so we're out of time. So, Lustri, go ahead, one more.
Yeah. Mike, you told me so many times how pleased you are to have me as a next door neighbor.
Oh, yeah.
But what I do resent was you were sitting at my kitchen table one Saturday morning. The phone rang, it was an audible sound, and I couldn't put my finger on the name. And then you said, I'm sorry, John, I have to go have a meeting now with the committee. And you hung up and you said, that was John Sununu.
Yeah.
Now, when you come to my house in the future, please, no cupcakes and no presents.
John Sununu is a very close, he autographed the book. John Sununu is a personal friend. I worked for him when he was governor of New Hampshire, building a power plant, and I was the one who got the unions to work to help to build the power plant. And now, there are no unions building power plants. There are no power plants. Okay, I'll be here if you want to talk. One more, okay.
No, Michael, I'll take another.
Real quick.
I wasn't too far behind you as far as our generations. I'm 73.
Yeah,
And
kid.
I have to say I'm proud that I was born when I was born.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, we won that World War II. It's probably the last war we ever did win. And I actually, my best years of life, I have to tell you, were the 50s and 60s. Even though I was involved, I had to go to Vietnam and things like that, but still,
Yeah.
they were good years. And, you know, one thing I always try to stress with people when I talk to them is that I grew up with this idea that one of the most important things you want to do to keep yourself militarily strong, everything else, it just doesn't matter that much, okay?
God help us if we get into a war now. God help us. We'll talk, okay? Thank you so much for coming. Everybody.